Hello and welcome again to another episode of Battle Ready. Where today we thought we'd take a minor detour from our usual Warhammer content and talk about one of Warhammer's competitors. A lot of people talk about how they've left AOS or 40K for one-page rules. One-page rules has Age of Fantasy, which is basically like the AOS version. And then it's got Grim Dark Future, which is 40K, right? And it is, the basic rules are free. Basic battle plan is free. Actually, they have several battle plans that are free as well. And gets a lot of buzz online. So if you've been watching our channel, you saw that over the past few weeks, we've been able to play a few games. We are probably going to play at least one more because we played the very basic game the first two times, and we're going to play one of the other battle plans with the cards coming up.
Cards.
But the question is it any good? Drake, is it any good?
It's fine.
It's fine. Would you like to elaborate on that?
So the reason I say it's fine is it's super simple.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we say, because I tend to agree with you. I might say it's a little bit better than fine, but I feel like it's fine. It's good. It's fine. It's definitely in that category. It's like it's very playable. I don't hate it when I'm playing it. There's nothing wrong with it. Does it excite me? Not as much. Let's talk about the good. So let's go talk about the good first. What are the good things about Age of Fantasy?
It doesn't take 30 years to play.
That is one of the best selling points for Age of Fantasy. It is way, way quicker. You get a pretty comparable army. It might be slightly smaller than AOS, but pretty comparable.
Yeah.
And the game takes like an hour.
Yeah. Compared to 3 or 4.
Yeah, well, with AOS, you're typically looking at around 2.5 to 3 hours. If you're moving 80 zombies around, you might be looking closer to 4 hours from all those movement phases.
If you got an Agash and a Kragnos, you're looking at more an hour and a half.
Yeah, there you go. If you bring an upcoming, maybe by the time this goes up, it'll be up. But either in an upcoming or a very recent battle plan, we had Kragnos and the Ironjaws, including Gordrakk.
So many big boys.
That's that's well over 1,000 points
it's
already.
It's 1,180.
Versus
the stupid Beast Claw.
The Beast Claw, which only have like 6 units anyway.
But they're so strong.
And that game did not last super long. That game was done in about 90 minutes, maybe.
Because smashy.
So that is true. I think probably the number one thing Age of Fantasy has going for it is that you can play a game. You can put your little plastic toys on the battlefield, get everything set up, and play. Although, one sort of detriment to that. So if you are playing with your guys and you're using, a kitchen table and some little red plastic cups and boxes and stuff, great. But, we are lucky enough that we have a lot of cool looking terrain.
Yep.
And some battle mats and stuff. And so, we use those. But they take some time to put out. So I feel like the one bad thing is Age of Fantasy is shorter, which is great, but it's also it's also so short that I actually feel like I'm going to spend so much time, half the time is setting up and tearing down. Whereas at least with Warhammer, it's like, okay, most of the time was the game, even if the game is longer. But in general, I agree. I think that's a good point for Age of Fantasy. What else is good about it?
For me, that's the only selling point.
Really?
I can't think of anything else.
Well, one thing I like about it, and let's talk about it, is alternating activation. So, Jake wasn't a fan. So in AOS 40K, it's an I go, you go system. So that means on my turn, I'm going to do all my hero phase stuff. Then I'm going to move all my units. You're not moving anything. Then I'm going to make all my shooting. Then I'm going to do all my charges. Then combat is I go, you go, where we take turns with combat. And then we have Battle Shock. And then the other person goes.
Yes.
So now they do all their hero phase stuff. I don't do anything. Then they do all their movement. I don't move anything.
Except
then they do all their charges and so on and so forth. So it's it's big turns, big blocky turns back and forth. With Age of Fantasy in the one-page rules system, I might have 8 units on the table. I pick one, it does its thing, and now that's it. I just moved my 1 unit. Now Drake goes. He might have 8 units on the table. He picks one, it does its thing, and then it goes back to me. And we just alternate back and forth until everything's been activated.
Mm-hmm.
So it uses alternating activation. Why don't you like that as much?
It feels like strategy battle game.
Okay, in what way?
That I have a lot of guys, but I'm using the war cry thing where I go, you go.
You think it's too much?
Yeah, I feel like it poses the same problem as strategy battle game, but it takes care of it better. But the problem's still there a little.
Well, I think that certainly it feels a little bit more like Warcry or something like that. But Warcry is also, you have like 8 to 10 guys usually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's manageable. In Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game, you had like 30 guys. And that was not as manageable. It was awful. And there was also other things, because you had to do all the different movements and then do the combats. Whereas in Age of Fantasy and in Warcry, you move and do your combat.
And fight.
Right? So you're completing the whole unit at once. So, yeah, I don't think that's a problem for me anyway. I don't think that's a problem at all. Now, one thing is, I do like alternating activation just because I feel like you're always in it, right? Sometimes we do it and we'll cut out the movement phase in our videos, but the movement phase, lots of times Drake's moving his guys around and I'm, sitting down, drinking my water bottle, right? Yep. Or it's my movement phase, I've got to move 1 million zombies, and it's like, all right, Drake's just reading his book or doing something else. Those are
looking at battle tactics.
Those are boring down times, right? So alternating activation does eliminate that.
Yeah.
But one thing I think that's a shame about it is it feels like, and we've only played 2 games of Age of Fantasy.
Yeah, we have.
And so I'm not saying that we're the best tacticians or anything like that. We're not pros at all.
Oh yeah, no.
At all.
Oh yeah, no.
So this might be stated a little bit from ignorance, but it does feel like it's a lot harder to do some tactics, like little pincer moves or double charges, or to pin units in particular areas, or to all those things that the fancy movement phase stuff that you can do in Warhammer that's really fun and cool. And I feel like having one dedicated hero phase where all your guys can do stuff is pretty cool, because then it's like, all right, well, I'm going to activate this guy who's going to cast this spell. So now that when these guys do their thing, and then I can see if that works. Oh, okay, now these guys are going to throw their potion over here. Oh, and these guys are going to turn on this ability. And so the stuff you have in the hero phase sort of bounces off one another. Whereas when you are doing alternate activations, each person does their thing. Like they explode and then it's calm. They explode and it's calm. And even when they can, do things that affect other units, you're like, okay, so I have to activate this guy first. And then if there becomes an order to it, it takes away a little bit from the alternate activation. One of the things I like about alternate activation is I can activate over here, right? Turn your attention over here. And then while you're paying attention and killing my sacrificial lambs, then suddenly I activate over here and I do a bunch of other stuff. But overall, I like it. I think it is a net positive. I would love to see something like that introduced into AOS. It would have to be done differently. Like maybe in the same way you share combat, there'd be a shared hero phase, and then movement would be alternate activating. Something. But yeah, overall, I like alternate activation. What do you think about the fact that you can use whatever models you want? So Warhammer, lots of people play WYSIWYG, right? Where whatever the model has, that's what it is. That's the War Scroll. And people do proxy, and very occasionally we will as well. But in one-page rules, there are no models.
Yeah.
You have to have your own models to play this game. All it is a rule set. So then the question is, well, what models do I use and what should I use? There's not like, oh, I want the Lord Imperator. Okay, go buy the Lord Imperator model. Nope. You want to use a guy? Buy the guy that you think is that guy. Go for it. So what do you think about that? Really? What's that about?
It just seems like this plastic cup is a giant unit of 30 guys.
Well, yeah, but you could pick whatever you want. So if there's supposed to be a giant unit of 30 guys, you can pick whatever 30 guys you want.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, what if someone doesn't use models? They use plastic cups.
Oh yeah, but what I'm saying, yeah, and but you can do that with Warhammer, right? You get a bunch of bases. You can just be like, yeah, that base is my Lord Imperator. It's all good.
Lord Imperator.
Exactly. Just write L-E. An L-I. Can't remember the spell. So I don't know about that. But I guess what I'm asking is, in one-page rules, you sort of have the freedom to bring whatever model you think looks cool, right? And then you're like, that model looks cool, so that's the model that's this guy, and then I'm going to build my rules around it.
Like, if you went and got a model, I feel like if you somehow had a duplicate army and two guys had the same unit, it'd be a little iffy because, like, for the funeral coach, someone could have, like, the black coach, and they could have, like, some 40K spaceship. And it's like, no, this is the funeral coach. No, this is the funeral coach. And then that they could get.
Well, maybe the person with the AOS one has, like, a Night Haunty army, and the one from 40K, maybe all of his ghosts are actually dark elves that he's painted ghostly like. And so he's got a dark elf vehicle as his black coach. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that is potentially very cool. I think there's, locking certain models to certain war scrolls the way that AOS does, I think provides a lot of security and a lot of assurance. Because if you think, oh, I want to have a Lord Relictor, well, you know what to get. You know what to buy. Whereas in one-page rules,
they're like, Lord Relictor.
You need to say, all right, I want to have this capability, so I need to find a model that, mirrors that close enough. Any other positives?
Nope.
All right, well, let's get to the negatives. What is bad about one-page rules?
Oversimplified.
Oversimplified. All right, tell us about that.
Moving 6 inches, or you can run 12 inches, or you can charge 12 inches. Fighting, look at your quality. Battle shock, look at your quality.
Yeah, so one of the things that makes the game go so quickly is that there isn't a lot of variation, right? Like Drake said, in the movement phase, everybody moves base 6. Some guys might have with a steed or something, they might have some bonuses to that. But in general,
everyone moves 6.
Everyone moves 6. And in the charge phase, there's no charge roll. You just move 12, right? And lots of stuff is based on the quality. Everything only has 2 stats, basically. Quality, which is everything except for defense, and defense.
And then maybe toughness.
That's just how many wounds you have, though. It's not even really a stat. So if you're rolling the hit, it's quality. If you're rolling for battle shock or morale, it's quality. And then if you're rolling your saving throws, it's defense. It is pretty simple. And I think that is, for me, the major drawback with one-page rules is I feel like the army, it makes everything feel very samey.
Yeah.
So I've had a chance to play Dark Elves that looked a lot like Daughters of Cain, and Lizard Men that looked a lot like Seraphon.
Which are literally lizard men.
And they felt pretty similar.
Yeah, they're like,
I think.
I just have new powers.
I think it suffers from not having. So one thing Warhammer AOS has that's fantastic is every army has battle traits, right? Mm-hmm. So if you play a Nurgle army, you're going to get your diseases. You're going to get all this stuff, right? If you play Daughters of Cain, you're going to get your blood rights table and your all-out slaughter and all this stuff. So it makes before you even pick a unit, it makes every army feel different. But the armies from one-page rules all feel samey.
Yeah.
Now, the spells are different. They all have their own unique spells. Every army has its own spell list. And, I do like the way spells do. Let's talk about that in a second. Mm. And some of the abilities, like Undead, you're going to find in the Nighthaunt army, but not on the Lizardmen. And the Lizardmen had like blood frenzy or something. Ferocious.
No, ferocious is a thing. Frenzy. Something. Monstrous.
So lots of those guys had it. But it's like, well, only if the particular unit has it. There's no overarching battle trait that's really unifying the army. One of my absolute favorite parts of Age of Sigmar is the variety. And to strip out that much variety,
it's like cutting off a limb.
That was hard. Yeah, that was hard.
It's like losing an arm.
It just makes the game, I don't know, less exciting. Everything feels similar.
It's like you're giving your models different names and better stats.
Yeah. All right. What about list building? How do you think list building AOS versus one-page rules?
AOS is a million times simpler.
I think, the gameplay on the table, one-page rules is way simpler.
They flip.
Maybe too simple.
They flip-flop.
But when it comes to list building...
It's like, I pick this, this.
Now, Age of Sigmar, I think the list building is pretty simple because there's a couple things you have to do, right? There's maxes on heroes, you have to have your battle line, and then you just add up the points, right? Every unit has points. One-page rules, 3 heroes, 10 units, but every unit is super customizable. So if you want to have, like you have a model and you're like, oh, I want to make this force exactly match my model, or I want to create the perfect special guy for me, and then I'm going to model that. If you're interested in that kind of specificity, then this is great because you can take a guy and say, all right, click the button. I'm going to put him on a horse. Ooh, that adds 20 points. Ooh, and I'm going to give him a better weapon. Okay, that's going to add 5 points. Oh, and I'm going to add this and this and this. And so as you add your different things, your guy becomes
better,
but
more pricey.
And more pricey, but he also is very customizable. So you get exactly the things you want. Whereas in AOS, it's sort of like,
pick.
If you pick this guy, here's his abilities.
You might get a weapon option.
Yeah, maybe you'll get weapon options. And I don't know that I love it. I think for some people, that amount of customization is going to be something they love. For me, I don't know that I love it. I mean, it's fine. Nothing wrong with it. One thing that's nice about it is it makes it easier to get to the level cap, right? Which in one-page rules is 1,500 points. Lots of times I've been at like 1,470. And so I go back through and I'm like, ooh, what upgrades can I give? We give 30 points of upgrades here because you can find little 5 and 10 point things here and there. And that's a lot harder, or can be a lot harder with Warhammer. But overall, I think it does require a lot more of investment and thought than any given list in AOS does. And for a game that's as simple as it is, I just don't know that it warrants that much additional effort. Yeah. Any other downs?
Spells.
You're gonna put that as a down?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I put that as an up. So I wanted to circle back to this. So I think the way spells work in one-page rules is a mark. Is it perfect? No, but it is a marked improvement. I think it's way better. So in Age of Sigmar, each spell, no matter how many wizards you have, you can only cast a spell once per phase.
That's good. You wanna know why?
Hold on. Let's go through it. Right, and then each wizard gets 1 cast, and some powerful wizards get 2. Right. The way you cast is you roll 2d6. You try to hit a special number, and then if the opponent has somebody another wizard, they can try to undo the magic by beating your roll. I think this makes Magic extremely swingy, just extremely swingy. I mean, sometimes you're going to roll that 11 and you're going to get off an amazing spell that's really going to have a big impact on the game. And sometimes you're going to just barely get it and then it gets unbound, right? And, when you cast a spell, there's 2 reasons it might fail. You might not roll enough, or it might get unbound. So there's actually 2 ways that spell can fail. Whereas with the one-page rule system, your caster gets a certain number of points, and then they can spend those points on spells. Every spell casts on a 4-up, so every spell's 50-50. And then if there's a nearby wizard, they can unbind it by spending their own points to make your cast harder. So if they spend one of their points, now your spell's only going off on a 5-up. Any spell can be cast multiple times as long as you have the points for it. I think, now that's not perfect. I know we could totally pick that apart as reasons why it's bad. But I like the points. I like that it's a single D6, so it's just a 50-50 shot. I like that the unbind isn't a separate roll. It's just I spend my points making your roll harder. So it's always one roll, right? You never have to go back and forth. I think all those things are good. And I like that you can cast spells, the same spell, multiple times. I think that casting a spell one time is okay, but maybe you could change it to where like different wizards could cast the same spell, right? So you could have 2 wizards casting Mystic Shield or whatever. That might be better. But yeah, the fact that one person messes up their cast and now nobody gets it, hate it. I like the one-page rules better. I like the single roll. I like that every spell basically is 50-50, and the more powerful spells aren't harder rolls. They just take more of your points. So if you want to cast a big spell, you can. It's just going to be your only spell. What do you think?
The reason I say down is it makes magic. It makes magic feel oversimplified.
It's definitely more simple. I don't know that it's oversimplified. I like that. I like the simplicity.
And the whole reason I think that Games Workshop has spells only be able to cast once is some spells will be so good, or the reason they do it is to stop good spells from being spammed. Like with your serpent egg thing, you just spammed it on my black coach and it almost died.
Take that, black coach.
That's why they don't do. That's why.
Yeah, I think that speaks probably a little bit more to the power level of the spells. So that was a one thing spell, and maybe that spell shouldn't have been a 1-point spell. Maybe it should have been a 2-point spell, so I could only have cast it once per turn. But yeah, I think that kind of thing, the power level would need to be looked at. But I think the system, right? The system of you can just cast, you're a wizard. You can just cast whatever you want. Just because your bro down the line there cast Mystic Shield doesn't mean you forgot how, right? You can cast it too. You're all good. I think I like that idea better. Now, I agree with you that spamming a powerful spell is problematic.
Yeah.
So probably there would need to be some adjustments, but I do like that. What about the single roll rather than double rolls?
Don't like it.
You'd rather do the cast and
I'd rather do the cast and unbind.
Why is that?
Because not only with the single roll, if they spend 3 points, it's a 7-up. You can't roll that on a single d6. But with the multiple dice rolls, it makes it feel like magic isn't as firmly under control as they would have us believe. It makes magic feel more wild, which makes sense, especially with AOS's lore, where magic's been affected by the Rite of Life, the Necro Quake.
Okay, I see what you're saying there. I definitely agree that it is more random. Yeah. So if you want to simulate the more randomness of magic, I think the AOS way is better. I just wonder if it's as good for the game. But I think overall, so there's pluses and minuses to one-page rules, Age of Fantasy. I think the reason, so a lot of people online will say, oh, I went to one-page rules, I never looked back, it totally replaced Age of Sigmar for me, now I never have to buy battle tomes, and blah, 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 blah. And by the way, if that's you, more power to you, right? Play the game you want to play. I'm not here to tell anybody that your game sucks, unless you're playing Song of Blades and Heroes. But what I would say is the world of one-page rules is not nearly as rich, and the experience on the tabletop is just, for me, not as fulfilling. I think there's something about having richer lore as you bring stuff out, and also not just, some people will say, well, I make my lore in my head. I have headcanon. And that's fine. Again, nothing wrong with that. But I think there is something about a shared experience, so that when I've got my Stormcast on the table, I know what that represents, and my opponent knows what that represents, right? There's something to that of a communal, collective story building that doesn't really pop out in one-page rules. One-page rules definitely feels like I'm playing a little army game. It's fun, it's fine, but it lacks the richness, and it lacks that, I don't know, where I feel way more invested in an Age of Sigmar game than I do in a one-page rules game. So I think overall, it's, for me, never going to replace Age of Sigmar.
Oh yeah.
At least not in its current iteration. Maybe, who knows? The new edition of Age of Sigmar is coming out next year. Maybe it'll be terrible, and I'll be like, okay, we're just going to play 3rd edition and one-page rules from now on, right? Who knows? But at least in its current iteration, I cannot foresee one-page rules being a replacement the way that some people have said.
I'm foreseeing.
Very nice. That said, one-page rules is, again, free, which is a huge, we should put that up among the pluses. That is a huge plus compared to Warhammer, which is the most opposite of free you can be, basically. So, yeah, I think overall, we like, or at least I'm going to speak for myself, I like one-page rules. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I will probably continue to play it. Every other week, we like to do a shorter game, whether it's Combat Patrol or 1,000 points or now an Age of Fantasy. We'll probably continue to slot it in on those occasionally. So there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a very fine game, but it's not Age of Sigmar.
No.
And I think that's, if you're looking for something that's a lot more rich, both in lore, in terms of tactics, in terms of the shared narrative that you can build.
Yeah.
One-page rules doesn't have much on Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I think we covered it all.
All right. Definitely tell us down in the comments what you think. If you have tried one-page rules, if we're way off and you think we're crazy people, let us know. And this has been another episode of Battle Ready. Thanks so much for watching.
Yeah.